All right, let's start to bring 2021 to a close by talking about the best books/series that I read in the year of 2021. Let's get to it. I decided to do series rather than single books because while I could do that as well, I read so many fantastic books this year and so many series that I just wanted to do a sort of top 5 series that I read this year. Now, they're not all complete. I have basically read up to as far as I can in the series, but the best series that I've read this year, starting with number 5 by the man himself, Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, The Blackest Heart, and soon next year, The Lonesome Crown, Book 3 of the 5 Warrior Angels trilogy. This is going to be my number 5 for the best series that I've read this year. Now, this is epic fantasy at its finest. You know what, Game of Thrones, you can just scoot back here. Robert Baratheon and Rhaegar Targaryen, okay? It is epic fantasy at its finest. These are thick, thick books full of lore, full of violence, full of fantastic characters, compelling narratives, brutal, vicious combat, and grimdark goodiness throughout. I've said it before, this has probably the best religion and critique on religion that I've ever read in fantasy, hands down. What Brian Lee Durfee does with religion in this book is he breaks it down in so many different ways where you have tons of different perspectives on the religion in this world, all the way from people who have realized that it's total crap to people who believe it wholeheartedly, and then you have people in, positions of power that abuse it and use it to gain more power and wealth and sort of control and manipulate the population. And just everything combines into this fantastic narrative of course, you have like the overall prophecy of the story. You have, chosen one-ish kind of people in this, but there's twists on that you don't see coming that are fantastic. Just the characterization, the dialogue, the deep, deep lore of these books are absolutely fantastic. I can't wait for book 3. I know it's going to be here next year. One of my most anticipated of 2022. Okay, next up, it's already in frame. The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan and eventually Brandon Sanderson. Now, I initially wasn't thinking that this would make my top 5, honestly, after the middle part of these books, but by the time I finished the series, damn, it just has so much going for it. No, I don't love everything about it, but just the sheer scale and size of everything and just the epic journey you go on, I find it hard to replace on this list. And again, it's what I've read this year. I'm not saying it might get bumped down from my top 5 of all time because there's better things that I've read. But for this year, completing this journey of the Wheel of Time, getting to the last battle, getting to the conclusion of all these various arcs of just the main cast that I genuinely loved from the books for the most part throughout the story. There's a few books here and there where certain characters either disappear entirely or their plot lines are not very good, but it does all wrap up in a nice bow at the end of it, and I thoroughly loved the majority of the POVs. I had a phone call, so I had to stop recording for a second. But yeah, the Wheel of Time, it starts out, I loved Eye of the World. I know people say it's redundant of a lot of fantasy. By book 4, I thoroughly enjoyed and loved the series. It kind of derailed for me going into the slog, but coming out of the slog, it was some of the best fantasy that I've read all year. And I'll just continue to say that about the series. It has so many great highs in fantasy and some of the best highs in fantasy ever, and some of the lowest in fantasy. It's very up and down throughout the series, but overall enjoyment, even though personally, there's a hair in my mouth, damn dogs. Even though personally, I feel like this could have been a 10-book series, and in my personal opinion, would have been perfect because there's a lot of side plots and hundreds, if not thousands of characters that ultimately I'm never going to remember. That's just a me thing. I know people love to pore over these texts and study everything about them. But for me, the main cast and, starting the Two Rivers all the way to where everybody finishes, it was just such a fun time getting through that and just getting a feel for what these people are really up against and getting to the point where these characters truly do grow from book 1 to 14. You get so much thrust upon you. Jesus. As a main character in this series, they all start, you know, kind of naive kids basically in the Two Rivers. And by the end of it, like, everybody's pretty powerful. They all have their different abilities and they're all respected in some way or fashion. They're all incredibly impactful on the story. And I mean, you don't make it through the series without losing a lot of characters. And that's not necessarily a good or bad thing, but I appreciate that not everybody's just safe in this world. You do lose people, you know, they lose people, and you have to sort of suffer through a lot of this with them. Not everything about this series is perfect. Obviously, the love interests are pretty bad. The romance is just not the focus of these stories. There's a lot of insta-love, things like that. But the way that Robert Jordan and then Brandon Sanderson sort of adapted, like the writing style for combat is really different and interesting. And the grand scale of things at times, especially, you know, Lord of Chaos, and then even in parts of, you know, Shadow Rising, the conclusion of most of these books have like a big bombastic epic fight of some sort. And you get all the way to the last battle, and I mean, you're almost like exhausted getting through it because it's so long, but it kind of has to be because everybody's involved. It was incredible. And I do need to still record my Memory of Light review. I will. And I don't know, overall, I loved completing it. It was quite a feat and journey in and of itself. I just overall loved it. I mean, the slog sucks. I won't pretend it doesn't. But getting to the end of it, I mean, it's a speed bump on the way to what is overall a fantastic series. And yeah, that's where I'm going to leave that one. Next up, we have Robin Hobb with the Farseer Trilogy. This was my sort of reintroduction to Robin Hobb because I had read Assassin's Apprentice over a year ago. Didn't really care for it. Came back to it this year to give it a better eye, I guess. What the hell am I saying? I gave it another go, and I loved it. Absolutely loved it. I love this entire trilogy. I do not think Assassin's Quest was too long or boring in any way at all. I know it gets critiqued for that, and I do joke that Robin Hobb took the length of Assassin's Quest and then just kept that going for the rest of time because I'm reading Ship of Magic, and Jesus, it's gigantic. This series, though, starting with Assassin's Apprentice, if you are unfamiliar with Robin Hobb's writing, there is a lot of sadness, but there's so much colorful and beautiful language that she truly knows how to weave a story together. The dialogue is impeccable. A lot of the characters are incredibly memorable. I mean, Fitz, the Fool, Ketrican. I mean, just the list goes on with this series, and there's some of my favorite characters in fantasy that, especially that I've read this year. They're so relatable in ways, and she brings them to life. I mean, you really struggle through Assassin's Apprentice with Fitz being such a young kid, being a bastard, being sort of looked down upon in society, and just all the shit that he has to go through. Like, you feel so bad for this guy. And by the end of Assassin's Quest, like, you still feel terrible for him, but he's growing so much throughout the books. Royal Assassin, if it wasn't for Sun Eater, was my book of the year. That did get dethroned by Howling Dark and then Demon in White, which I'll get to in a second. But this series, just it really tugs at your heartstrings. Very few books ever make me cry or even bring a tear to my eye. This did it several times throughout the series. It's just so well done. It's almost mentally draining at times just because of how well she captures emotion and feelings and really truly makes you care for these characters. And these are definitely, you know, on the opposite end of the spectrum of a lot of other fantasy that I read, where it's a lot more poetic at times and it's not heavily focused on combat whatsoever. There is always sort of a looming threat of combat in the background, but it's never really truly the focus of the story. It's really about characters and their inner thoughts and feelings. And I mean, you're following Fitz throughout this story, obviously, as he's like telling you his life. And damn, it's so good. And I want to read all of her works because I truly respect her as an author. I think she is fantastic with characters. Even when the plot isn't the focus of the story or even really that prevalent. I mean, parts of Assassin's Quest, is like they're questing, they're walking and talking and for like hundreds of pages, and it's awesome. I love her books so far. Farseer definitely stuck out as something truly incredible for me, and I love it. So that's my number 3 of this year. Okay, now number 2 is a sci-fi fantasy blend space opera, everything that is right in the world, and that would be Christopher Ruocchio's Sun Eater series. Now this is actually going to be several more books, as we've learned. Kingdom of Death is book number 4, with book number 5 a few months later next year. I believe it also Kingdoms of Death just got pushed to March 22nd, I think is the date. Nevertheless, we have 2 more of these coming next year, which is fantastic. I read these with Leanna of Leanna's Library, and we absolutely loved everything about it from the jump. I mean, whether it be The Lesser Devil, which is a side story following Hadrian's, who's the main character, his brother, these other stories I'm actually going to read shortly before Kingdoms of Death. I have not read any of the other short stories yet. The main series is where it's all at, though. Holy shit, this took me by surprise. It's so well written. It's so beautiful in the word choice and prose. The action is truly epic. Space opera in every sense of the word. I mean, they travel the cosmos over hundreds and thousands of years. You go in and out of cryo sleep to get your characters to certain places. You've got just all the sci-fi goodness of technology, and you blend that with, magic and fantasy of sort of like a chosen one with obvious, its own twists on it. You get tons of non-human species and languages and tons of lore, really out there weird things that happen too. You've got like time manipulation, and you've got all these different races, vying for power, and you've got this whole spin on, can there truly be peace between humanity and these other species? It's so incredible. It spans such a long time for this main character, who again, sort of like Voth in Name of the Wind, is retelling his story, or, Fitz in Farseer. It's sort of at the end of the line telling you about everything that gets him to that point. So you truly don't know what you're being told up front of he's, destroyer of suns and has killed billions of people and has wiped out the Sea Elsin, all these things that are like you're introduced to right off the bat. He's telling you the story, but it's starting way before that, and just everything about it is fantastic. The nods to, ancient Earth culture, the nods to Roman civilizations, to poetry, to just everything that is in this book series, is just so brilliantly done. If I rated books, they'd all be 10 out of 10s. Just wow. I mean, just the storytelling is fantastic. The action is incredible. The dialogue is brilliant. There's one romantic relationship that I do truly ship, and I enjoy it. There were a few in here that I was like, what? I don't care about them. Mainly, you know who you are, okay? Just everything about these books, though, they're just so damn good, and they're massive, but you almost want more from these books. They're just so well done that I have not finished a book and been like, like that was too long. Everything about these books is fantastic. And just the places that Ruocchio takes you, specifically in books 2 and 3, where things really start to get out there and weird and incredibly cool and interesting. It's just like, how do people come up with this? It's a brilliant series, in my opinion. I'm super excited for Kingdoms of Death and whatever book 5 ends up being titled. I don't believe that title is out yet. But that is definitely my number 1 most anticipated book of next year. I absolutely cannot wait. If you love sci-fi, you love fantasy, you love sort of like a hero's journey, you want deep, intricate lore to dig yourself into, pick these books up. I cannot recommend them enough. They are simply fantastic, and I know there's plenty of other booktubers and people that you'll find in various Discords that absolutely love these books. Just pick them up, please. You're doing yourself a disservice if you do not read this series. Okay, so if I look a little bit different, it's because it's nighttime now. I had to stop recording for several hours and come back to it. So, my number 1, you're not going to see behind me because there's too many books. So I'm just going to grab the last two that I still need to review on the channel. Peace Talk and Battlegrounds, because of course I'm talking about the Dresden Files. So this was another series that I made a conscious decision to finish in 2021. This and The Wheel of Time. And this is definitely the best series that I've read all year long, just as a whole. I've loved damn near every single book. I mean, even my least favorite is a pretty good book. And this is one of those series that it starts out as such a sort of quaint detective urban fantasy and truly grows into epic fantasy by Battleground. I was going to say the conclusion, but it's not done yet because there's several more books to come and then a follow-up trilogy that's going to be even bigger. So the Dresden Files is absolutely amazing. I love the setting. I love everything about the mystical creatures and just the way that vampires are portrayed, the way that the Fae are portrayed. Even though I didn't like them initially in Summer Night, I love them by the end. They're so wicked and evil and sinister and powerful and awesome. The characters, the cast, I mean, Harry and Michael and Molly and Murphy and just everybody is so fantastic. I mean, when you have villains like Marcone and you have Nicodemus, they're so compelling, and truly, like, everybody's grown so much with the series that they're so much more than just a villain in a book now. Like, there's so many relationships and different things at stake throughout this entire series. And by the time you get to Battleground, which is pretty much a gigantic fight scene, I loved it. And that's not to say that the character moments and stuff weren't there, because they were. There's plenty of plot development and fantastic dialogue and emotional moments, and just everything from Harry's growth, from the beginning of Stormfront all the way to Battleground. He's been through some serious shit, and he has had the crap beaten out of him repeatedly. So many ups and downs. Jim Butcher does not shy away from just dragging Harry through the dirt and the mud and the muck, and I love it. Harry's just a hilarious character. This is by far my favorite audiobook that I've ever listened to, is just James Marsters doing the voice of Harry Dresden, and reading these books is absolutely fantastic. Just the comedy is next level. The pulling from pop culture is so well done, and it doesn't feel ham-fisted. It doesn't feel out of place. It totally fits Harry's character. Just everything is just so well done in the series, and it's unlike anything that I've read before. It definitely continues to be one of my favorite series in general that I've read. I could read or listen to several Dresden books just on repeat, back to back to back, which I ended up doing to wrap up the series to this point. Was I read probably 6 Dresden books in about 2 months when I wasn't going to. It's kind of hard to put them down once you get going. It's one of those series, man, that you see it reread a lot, just because there's something about it that it draws you back in. You feel like, I don't know, you feel comfortable coming back to it, and it's not like they're shorter books, so they're easy to get through, but it's always an adventure. As I can't put enough praise on the series. The Dresden Files is my #1 series that I read this year. I did start some of it last year, obviously, but just over this entire year, I've read the rest of it, and more to come, and now I have to wait with everybody else for new books to come out. But that's going to wrap up my favorite series that I've read in 2021. So to recap, we had The 5 Warrior Angels by Brian Lee Durfee. We had The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson. Then, of course, we have Farseer by Robin Hobb. We have the Sun Eater series by Christopher Rocchio. And finally, The Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. Absolutely incredible books. I highly recommend everything in this video. Please go out and read them if you haven't. They're all a lot of fun for various reasons, even Robin Hobb's Farseer, where it's not always fun, but it's such a good read. And yeah, those are the best things that I read in 2021. Again, I wanted to keep this a series rather than just single books, because there's just so many books that I read that I love this year, and I wanted to include a lot of them here. So that's gonna do it for me, guys. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. Enjoy whatever vacation time you have, spend time with your family, and